Hello everybody, welcome back, and today we'll be going over another very instructive game I found that was between Andrey Shariyazdanov and Valery Petukhov. Now this game features a concept known as the Rook lift, which can greatly add firepower to one's attack. Okay, so the game started off c4, c6, e4, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, d4, knight to f6, and knight c3, transposing into the Nf5 Bd7 attack from the Caro Khan. Now the more common way to get to this position is e4, c6, d4, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, c4, knight to f6, and knight to c3. He gets to the same exact position, and black in the game chose to go for e6. Knight to f3, bishop to e7, c takes d5, and knight takes d5. Now here you'll notice that white has inflicted himself an isolated queen's pawn. Now this would be advantageous for black if white did not have any compensation for it, because it's just weak, and if white didn't have any compensation for it, black would just be strategically winning. White's compensation lies in the fact that he has opened up all the lines against black's future kingside, and can maybe bring his pieces into the attack, and he might have big attacking opportunities in exchange for the strategical weakness he has inflicted on himself. So bishop to d3, obviously placing the bishop on the strong diagonal, knight to c6, castles, castles, rook e1, and knight cb4. Now I believe this is the start of black's downfall, because this move weakens e5, and later white's knight can jump to e5 uncontested. So instead of committing after this light bishop here, I think black could have just played bishop f6, and this is a more solid option, and I think black is totally fine here. So on knight cb4, obviously you don't want to give up that light bishop because it's a great attacking piece along this b1 h7 diagonal, and plays bishop to b1. Knight to f6 and knight e5, obviously taking advantage of the fact that the knight is no longer on c6. Bishop to d7 and bishop to g5. Now here, I believe white could have immediately lifted his rook up onto the third rank and played rook g3 in one go, instead of playing bishop to g5, because in many lines white wants to play bishop to h6 and apply more pressure onto this g7 pawn. Now if he immediately played rook e3 to g3, he would have saved one move, and the attack would have gone faster. So I believe this was more accurate. But bishop g5, I guess, is also fine, and rook to c8. Now here I think this is black's biggest mistake, because black fails to realize the power of white's future attack. Instead, I believe bishop to c6 was much better, and after rook e3, g6, obviously nullifying this power of the light bishop, rook to g3, and the excellent move knight to d7, which basically attempts to exchange off white's key attackers. So here, white's most challenging response is bishop to h6, because now black is forced to give up the exchange after knight takes e5. Because if rook e8, the problem is white busts down the door with bishop takes g6, and after h takes g6, knight takes g6, f takes g6, white has queen to h5 with overwhelming firepower against black's king. So bishop to h6, knight takes e5 was forced, and now white takes the exchange, but black is actually totally fine after bishop takes f8, d takes e5, queen takes d1, knight takes d1, rook d8, knight to e3, and bishop c5. Now black has two very, very strong bishops placed on these diagonals, of a rook on the open file, and white, on the other hand, has a misplaced rook on g3. So all these factors combined give black full compensation for the exchange, and black's totally fine. But rook to c8 fails to do this, and white's best move is rook to e3 and was played in the game. So this is called the rook lift, where you basically move the rook up some ranks and then transfer it on to a different file to assist in the attacking of the opponent's king. And now here black played g6, which is not the prettiest move, but it's also very forced, because if he does nothing. White's threatening. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, bishop takes h7, check, king takes h7, queen h5, king g8, and rook h3, and then delivering checkmate next move along this h file. So g6, rook to g3. Obviously, this is the intention of a rook lift to apply more pressure along the king. Bishop to c6, bishop h6, rook e8. And now here is the critical moment in the game, and it's white to play and win here. I would like you to pause the video, but I'm warning you, it's not as simple as it looks. Now here the first thing you probably noticed is that all of white's pieces line up to g6. And if you thought that the sacrifice was the correct move, you're wrong, because after h takes g6, if you attempt to sacrifice the second piece, f takes g6, and then bring in the queen, the problem is black has this amazing resource, knight to c2. And after queen takes c2, black's other move is bishop to e4, which takes advantage of this pin and defends everything. So instead of sacking the second piece after h takes g6, if you attempt to play queen b1, the same problem, knight to c2, queen takes c2, and bishop e4. There's no win here. White is up a pawn, but you can be more winning than this. And also, by the way, after you sacrifice both pieces, instead of queen b1 here, if you try to just take the pawn, the problem is king to h7, and there's no win. So now, once you realize all of that, the move becomes very obvious. The move is a3. I know it looks very weird, but this is the winning move, because now the knight must go back, and now you don't have this knight c2 resource, and now it's appropriate to sack the piece. So here, bishop takes g6 is the winning continuation, because you don't want to play knight takes g6, because if you sack like this, the problem is bishop to d6, and any discovered checks, you'll just take the rook. So bishop takes g6 was the more accurate continuation, and then you take with the knight. Now if you try bishop d6, the thing is knight e5, and you deliver the discovered check, because the bishop can no longer take the rook. And then after king to h7, white's winning continuation is knight takes f7, and if you take the rook, the problem is queen to d3, king g8, and queen g6 is checkmate. So here, knight takes g6, f takes g6 is basically forced, and queen to d3. And this wins the game immediately for white because of the threat of queen takes g6, and this is unstoppable, so therefore black resigned. I hope this helps you in your future games, because it does show if you know how to utilize a rook lift, it can significantly add firepower to your attacks. And I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.